to start with. To start with, the definition of psychological assessment. Psychological assessment is a broader term which talks about gathering, integration of psychological data for psychological evaluation. So it is talking about the overall evaluation of the person regarding psychological construct. Okay, so to evaluate a person, we need to gather information or data regarding the person on the selected psychological construct. Okay, for this, we need to use different psychological methods. Okay, that would be covered in this particular class. Okay, so as the definition talks about, it is gathering and integration of psychological data for psychological evaluation through the use of tests. Okay, that is psychological tests, interviews, case study, and behavioral observation, and specially designed apparatus and measurement procedures. Okay, so we will be talking about some of the psychological methods in this particular topic. So it is overall gathering and integration. Okay, so come up with evaluation. Okay, which is a broader term. So it is not only making use of one type of psychological methods, but it is trying to use maximum possible different tools or different methods so that a comprehensive in-depth evaluation of a person can be done to assess or to know the strengths or weaknesses of the person on psychological constructs. Okay, so it is a very broader term, and as we discussed before also, that when you're talking about psychological testing, so testing is part of psychological assessment. So testing comes under psychological assessment, and psychological assessment is broader term. It's not only using one particular tool, but it is a combination, or it making use of many psychological methods. Okay, we will be talking about the following psychological methods in detail. Okay, so first to start with, so we have psychological methods under our syllabus, that is the observation method, interview, case study, and norm reference tools. Okay, so we will be talking about these different methods in depth. Okay, so I would be sharing a slide also so that we get to know in detail about these units. Okay, so when we talking about observation method, example, yeah. So this is about observation method. So you can see in the slide that observation is a method which is most commonly used. So in our behavioral sciences and the social sciences, we mostly or commonly use observation method. Okay, so this observation method is most commonly used to not only to know the observable behavior, but it also make us or give us an opportunity to know the non-verbal cues. Okay, when you're talking about verbal, what the person is speaking about, what the person is trying to tell us, and it is also giving us an opportunity where we can get to know about the non-verbal, where the person is not able to speak, but based on the observations, based on observations of non-verbal behaviors like his facial expressions, his body posture, and what are different body parts, like for example, hands or legs, the way he's shaking hands or legs. Okay, so how he is trying to project himself is also can be known. So this is how it is. It is an most commonly as well as a very reliable method, because it is not only giving us an opportunity to know the verbal but also non-verbal cues. So it is a direct observation, or it's a direct method where you can observe a person. Okay, so it's giving us an opportunity to make observations about the non-spoken content, that is non-verbal cues also. So most commonly used and most important and effective method, that is the observation method. So in a way, we all observe things around us. Okay, but this sort of observation is not scientific observation. Yes, so we are looking about, or we are looking around many things without a purpose. Okay, but when you're talking about observation, it is a selected, okay, pattern of behavior. Okay, you're not, we are just looking around, but we are focused on the selected behavior. Okay, so before observation, we need to make the selection of what part of behavior you would like to make an into, or you make an observation. Okay, so it's not that you just looking around and you're trying to just casually look around, but you have a purpose. You have selected a particular behavioral pattern which you would like to observe, watch carefully, no doubt. So how frequently this behavioral pattern is elicited by one particular subject or the person whom I am observing. Okay, so that particular pattern of behavior. So how frequently it is, or the person is eliciting or showing that particular response, and also I am making a record of that particular behavioral patterns so that I can analyze and I can come up with a meaningful interpretation, or where I can get an in-depth, okay, analysis or in-depth measure of psychological constants. So it is a scientific method, and when you're just looking around without a focus or without a purpose, it is not a scientific method. Okay, so very useful method for the psychologists or the researchers, especially in the behavioral sciences. Okay, and it is a systematic, planned, and recorded. As I said, it is planned and recorded, and is subjected to checks and controls to validate. It gives a chance, okay? It gives a chance for us to validate, okay? What a person is telling, what a person is telling, and to what extent it is authentic, okay? And what extent it is authentic, okay? If what a person is trying to tell, for example, what pain is undergoing or what distress is undergoing, so I can know it verbally as well as I can authenticate it. I can cross-check then and there itself by looking at the other non-verbal cues. So what a person is saying and what expressions he is expressing. So both can be evaluated or checked for the genuineness or authenticity then and there itself. So that is the beauty of this particular observation method. So not only just I'm recording, not only I'm trying to know what a person is trying to tell, his pain, his distress, okay, what going in his mind, but I can also cross-check or validate that particular distress by looking at his body postures or his expressions. Okay, we call it as non-verbal cues also. So under observation, the information is sought by the way the investigators own direct method. So they're trying to seek, okay, not from the secondary source, but it is giving opportunity where the person or the psychologist, it can directly take or collect data from the subject itself. Okay, it's most reliable source of data or information. Okay, which can be relied upon because it can be checked and cross-checked or validated then and there itself. So what a person is telling and to what extent it is genuine can be cross-checked. So most useful and commonly used method in behavioral sciences. Okay. Okay, when we're talking about the types of observations, the observation method can be of different types. For example, naturalistic observation versus controlled observation. So naturalistic observation is observation where the things, for example, if I'm interested to know how frequently my subject is getting aggressive, and if I'm interested to know at classroom or in a classroom at school, so I make observation in the classroom only. So as a teacher, I can make observation and note down how frequently my particular subject, my particular student is resorting to aggressive behaviors, with what provoking him, what situations are leading to that particular behavior pattern, and how frequently he is getting into this particular behavioral pattern. Okay, so I'm not creating the situation, but I'm trying to observe as and where the particular responses are evolved, or where the person is eliciting or giving that particular behavioral pattern. Okay, so naturalistic observation is a method where observation is made by the psychologist or the researcher in the natural settings where the responses are elicited or shown. So, example as I said, it can be a playground. If I would like to know, so how frequently my particular student is getting aggressive. So I can check when he is in the playground and when he is in a game playing. So I need to wait for that particular situation to happen. So I make an observation in the playground only. So that is the naturalistic observation. So as naturally the behavioral responses are elicited by the subject, the researcher or the psychologist is trying to observe, record, then try to analyze that. Okay, that is naturalistic observation. The complete opposite would be a controlled observation where the situations or environment is controlled. Generally, the controlled environment or controlled condition is a lab condition. Okay, best example can be a lab setting, a psychological lab, where a person is taken to a lab or controlled condition and try to know or try to make an observation about the selected behavioral pattern. Okay, keeping all the things under control and trying to know my particular selected behavioral pattern. So how frequently it is elicited or shown by my particular student. Okay, so I'm not waiting for the natural responses, but I am trying to create situations and look for the behavioral responses of the student. Okay, the main disadvantage of this particular method is that when the person who is undergoing a experimental condition or when they're brought to experimental conditions, so that particular awareness that they are being tested or observed will make a person to give some false impressions or false responses. The genuineness of the responses may not be guaranteed because the person being aware that he is under observation may not and mostly cannot give you the genuine natural responses. So if I'm interested to note down the natural responses, so I need to go with naturalistic observation. Okay, so that is the limitation of controlled observation. So why is this particular controlled observation is important? So what is need for it? Because, for example, when I'm talking about a playground, okay, or a classroom, it's okay. But when I'm talking about to know how a person is reacting when he is into an accident or a natural calamity, or for example, when there is a terrorist attack conducted. So this is the reason I know we cannot predict that when this particular natural calamities will occur or accident will occur. So how people react. Okay, so as it is unknown, So I cannot wait and I cannot know or record observations or the behavioral patterns. So I need to create the situation. So when there is no scope for making naturalistic observation, so then the researcher or the psychologist will go with this controlled observation. They try to create the situations, they try to make observations so that they can record and they can further analyze. The best example can be our mock drills. So as accidents cannot be predicted, so they go with mock drills. So mock drill of a fire accident at a metro station can be the best example for this type of controlled observation, because a fire accident cannot be predicted, and in general also they cannot make an observation because it is an emergency situation. So for that, the situation can be created, and based on the behavioral responses, they can be recorded and they can be further analyzed. Okay. Another type of, okay, observation is being participative versus non-participative observation. So participative observation is a condition where the researcher or the psychologist himself is being a part of the group which is observed. Okay, so is one among the group which you would like to observe, make an observation. For example, so how frequently, if my particular student is getting aggressive in a classroom, so the observer can be part of that particular group. For example, when I talked about how aggressively my particular student is getting in a playground or while in a play, so he can be one among the group or one among the team, and also he can make observations. Okay, so it is having good natural responses because the person is not aware that somebody is observing or they have been watched. Okay, because the observer is one among them. Okay, so when that is not possible, then we will go with non-participative observation. So non-participative observation is a condition where a person is not a member or not among the group which is under observation, but he would be at somewhere standing at a place and he would like to make observations, look for the particular pattern of behavior, behavioral traits, and note down, record, then try to analyze. Okay, the best advantage when you're talking about participative versus non-participative is that participative will give you the most natural responses, but being a part, being one among the observed or the subjects is not always possible. So to give or to get part of the group will be a time consuming, and also it is not guaranteed that they will show or they trust you. So if you don't have time and if you would like to go with, okay, the observation, then you need to be a non-participative observer where you are one among the audience, one among the classroom, or you making a observation being at a distance, and also you making sure that the person under observation is not aware that they are observed. So this is about observation method. Then we will talk about interview method. Okay, under interview, so interview is also commonly used because while you make observation, you try to observe, but when you need to know information directly and from the respondent or from the subject for in-depth knowledge or to know about what are the reasons for the present psychological condition, okay, the best method used can be the interview method. So interview method is commonly used in surveys. Okay, so survey method is a commonly used method in social sciences, and also the word interview is common in the sense, okay, it is most used term. Okay, so when you're talking about just casual talk without a purpose, okay, that is informal. So we're not talking about that particular informal talk, but we're talking about a conversation, okay, between it can be two people or it can be among group of people. Okay, the person who is taking interview is called interviewer, and the person who is attending or giving the responses is called interviewee. So there is an interviewer and an interviewee. Okay, so not all can conduct this interview. So certain skill is required to make most efficient data collection or data gathering by the psychologist or the research. Okay, so certain amount of skill is required for this interview. Okay, and it is also a scientific method because it is making use of a direct face-to-face interaction like in observation. Okay, so here also we can directly cross-check or authenticate what the information the person is telling. So this is how it can be defined as a face-to-face interaction between two or a group of people, generally the interviewer and interviewee. Okay, it involves gathering of data through direct verbal interaction between interviewer and interviewee. Okay, it can be person to person, person to a group, or a group to a person, or group to group. Okay, the most commonly seen interview is between a person to person. Okay, so when you're trying to gather information between, okay, when you're trying to gather information regarding the present condition, or you would like to know or gather information regarding our psychological constructs, you directly interact face to face with the subject. Okay, the face to face interaction with the purpose of knowing or collecting data or information from the respondents is called as interview. Interview can be between two people, that person to person or person to group. Okay, generally a group to a person, which is commonly seen in job interviews. Okay, when you go for a job interview, okay, so group of experts will be assessing or trying to know so how well the person will fit into the job. They try to know, okay, his knowledge levels, how competent he is, so how good he can fit into the job. So their group of experts will be interviewing a person, okay, single person, okay, and also it can be group to group, okay. So these interviews can be again of two types: structured and unstructured. Okay, so when we're talking about structured interviews, a structured interview is a condition where, okay, the questions are predetermined or they have prepared before the interview itself. Okay, the interviewer or interviews, they will sit down, they will try to plan the questions or the items which should be asked. Okay, based on the purpose. So what purpose, or for what purpose they are trying to conduct interview, so that based on that, what all the required information they would like to gather from the particular, okay, interviewee. So based on that, they try to frame the questions, okay, beforehand, and they would like to arrange, or they would like to go in a pattern or a systematic procedure. Okay, example, they start with a rapport building. They try to make the person a little bit comfortable by asking about the general information about him, his qualifications, his name, etc., so that he can, okay, become a little bit relaxed. Then they start with, okay, questions in a structured manner. Okay, so in a structured, or it is also called as directional, because it is giving a direction, it is a purpose, it is a formal interaction with a purpose. Okay, so these structured interviews would be predetermined. They have decided what questions to be asked, what should be the first, so how to carry in the process of interview, then how to end the interview. So entire process based on questions, what questions should be asked, they have determined, they have planned, they have arranged it in. systematic manner, and all the questions would be similar, or they would be asked same manner and same pattern to all the interviewees or all the respondents. So whoever is attending, the same questions will be asked in the same sequence from starting to the ending to assess or to know the data regarding a particular selected purpose. Okay, so it is a structured one, or it is giving the direction. Okay, and it is also called as closed type because the questions are already determined. For that, the expected response is also predetermined. Okay, for this question, this should be the answer. So likewise, they have already predetermined the questions and as well as the expected responses. Okay, so when you're talking about a unstructured interview, which is also called as informal interview, because the questions are not prepared, the sequence of questions is not predetermined, and it is ascertained or it is conducted to know in-depth information generally. Okay, when the person is interested to know in-depth gathering of information regarding the particular selected psychological construct from the interviewee, so they can go with an open-ended, that is, the questions are not predetermined, they have not been decided, there is no sequence in which the question should be asked. So they will generally start with the rapport, and based on the responses of the respondent or the interviewee, they will continue the interview. So there is no direction. So non-directional, and also it is not structured, and it is giving a scope where they can have responses, a number of responses based on the respondent. So there is no fixed, and also it is giving a flexibility where they can offer in-depth analysis. That is, if a interviewee responses yes or no, so they can go with a follow-up question with a question like why you accept it or why you say yes, what is the reason, do you think is that correct or wrong. So in this way they can follow up, they can know the more in-depth personal reasons or attitudes or their interest based on their responses. Okay, so this is about the structured or formal or a open or a closed type of interview compared to a non-formal or unstructured or non-directional interview. So interview is also a most commonly used as well as a method which can give you a genuine responses because there is a scope and flexibility when you're talking about a unstructured one. You can get to know the in-depth information or collect in-depth data regarding the present psychological condition of a person. Okay, so that is possible with interview. So when you're talking about a directional or a structured one, generally it is used in job placements where we are trying to know so how a candidate or a respondent or a subject is better off when compared to the other respondents. Okay, we can make a comparison by the level up to which they could answer. Okay, out of 50 questions, so how many you could answer? So that can be made compared when we are going with the structured interview. So based on the purpose again, to which for which you are conducting interview, so you need to either go with a structured or a non-structured interview. They're very common and they have their own limitations. Okay, one is okay fixed, one is closed, the other one is okay open and flexible, where if the psychologist or the interviewer interested to know to cross check whether the person have the in-depth knowledge, so that can be done in an unstructured interview. So based on the purpose, can go with that. Okay, so interview is also a very important method. Okay, then we will talk about a case study method. Okay, it's called a case study method. So this particular word of case study is taken from medical terminology, as we have medical cases. Okay, when we go to a hospital setting, okay, each patient is taken as a case. They have a case ID for that particular person, and they try to gather all the information in the frequent or subsequent visits. So whenever you make a visit, so they try to collect, record all the information so that they can come to a conclusion. You can make an analysis. In the same way, when you're talking about a case study focuses on one instance, one person, one situation, okay, one incident, okay, of the thing that is to be investigated. Okay, so it can be about a person. Okay, so what are the reasons for the particular condition, psychological condition of a person? The person is taken as a case now, so it's an in-depth. So in-depth, it is using multiple data gathering methods. As we talked about, it makes observation, they conduct interviews, they take data from, okay, the secondary sources also. Okay, if a person is not available to give the required information, then they also go with the available records so that they can collect the related information of the present condition. Okay, also they try to make a relationship with the present condition to all the available recorded or the direct data which is available and which can have a relationship with the present condition. Okay, so in case study, under psychological observation or psychological method, okay, if there is a subject with psychological distress, okay, now the psychologist trying to get back to the previous stages. That is, if he's adolescent, they're trying to get back to the present adolescent condition to the time of birth. What all information they could gather regarding the candidate or the person, they try to gather. Okay, they try to take information from the parents, from the friends. If he's into a college, they try to go to college. If they talk to their friends, classmates, okay, concerned authorities, to ascertain to know whether there are any instance of this particular distress or shown by this particular candidate. Okay, they can go to school level, they can even try to know whether there were any birth complications at the time of birth. So it is so in depth that they try to gather all possible information. For example, if there are no direct, okay, data collection possible, then they will go with the secondary, that is the school records or what they call scholastic records, whether any incidence of this particular distress has been shown by this particular person. So they're trying to collect all the data, the primary sources, that is the persons who can give the direct experiences about the person, if not any recorded statements or records which can give some input for the present condition to the, okay, birth or to the prenatal stages. They try to collect all the information regarding one particular person or one particular subject. Okay, they try to collect all the information possible so that they can ascertain, they can know the reasons, or they could come up with a possible solution to the present condition, the present disorder, the present distress of the subject. Okay, a case study. As we have a medical case, so this is also a case where we're talking about one particular person, one particular institution, one particular incident that is of importance. Okay, if that is of any importance, if that is of our concern, so we are trying to gather all the information to know what are the reasons for the present condition and to analyze to come up with a possible solution so that we can answer or we can make the person come out of that particular distress. So gathering all possible information, primary, secondary, okay, and also making use of multiple or many psychological methods so that you can address the present problem or the present situation. So this is called as a case study method. Case study method is important in the sense to get an in-depth information. So if the psychologist interested to know or gather in-depth information, they, then they can go with case study. But the disadvantage is that it is time taking, okay, and also little bit expensive in the sense you need to get back or put all the people places which are related with the particular condition so that you need to gather information, and also getting of information is also a bit difficult because if the person is not available, then they need to go with the secondary data, that is records, hospital records, etc., scholastic record, etc. And even if that is not available, so you cannot go with this particular case study. So these are the limitations of this particular case study. Okay. Then we will be talking about another method which is called as norm referenced, okay, psychological test. Okay, when you're talking about norm reference, okay, these are the tests, okay, designed. These are the tests designed to know. Okay, norm reference test or the test or the measuring tools designed to know the psychological constructs of a person. Okay, attitude, aptitude, interest. Okay, especially they are used to know the achievement, performance of a student with certain norms, established norms. Okay, so norm reference tests are the standardized tests which are designed to know the achievement or the performance of a student, and which is also giving us an opportunity to make a comparison with the other students or people of same level, same age, okay, same capabilities or same grades. Okay, as we have of exams based on the same grade, okay, these standardized or norm referenced tests can be conducted and they can be made, okay, for comparison with other students. So how better my respondent is. So I can make a comparison among the same age, same grade, same capability people, and I can give a report according to that. Okay. So based on certain norms, for example, like grades, okay, percentages, percentiles can be given, and the exams, what we have, as we know, they are grade based. They are they are grade based. So this is how you can come up with grades. Okay, so these are called as norm reference test. Norm reference tests are the standardized tests aimed at or developed to measure, okay, psychological constructs like abilities, okay, achievement, performance of students in comparison to the same age, same level, same capabilities, and to give a report based on that. Okay, so this is about norm reference test. Okay. Then we will talk about block 2, psychological testing. Okay, so this particular topic it talks about, okay, psychological test. As I said, the psychological test is a part of psychological assessment. It is a designed tool or a measurement tool to measure a particular selected behavioral or psychological construct. Okay, so there is a purpose for that. Okay, then we will talk about, okay, meaning. So according to, yeah, so according to Robert, so it is defined as a test a objective and a standardized procedure for measuring a psychological construct using a sample of behavior. Okay, it is given in 1998. The most okay, meaningful definition because it is talking about a objective and a standardized procedure. Okay, so a test is a objective without any bias, a objective and a standardized. So a test which is designed is also a standardized because there are certain standardization procedures. So when you standardize, okay, especially to measure psychological constructs. Okay, so how are we measuring the psychological constructs? By making use of sample of behavior. Okay, we are taking certain sample of behaviors, try to measure them so that you come to know or you can measure the psychological constructs. Okay, so this is definition of psychological testing. Okay, then we have characteristics of psychological test. So not every test is a psychological test. To be called as a psychological test, there are certain characteristics. Okay, the first character is objectivity. Okay, a psychological test is having objectivity. So objectivity is defined as okay, free from subjective judgment regarding the ability, skill, knowledge, trait, or potentiality to be measured and evaluated. Okay, it is free of your subjective judgment. There is no bias. They are free from our subjective judgments, subjective bias, that is favoritism towards any one particular candidate or the subject or group of people. Okay, so there is no chance factor. They are free from our subjective okay, judgments and all that. Then standardization. Okay, psychological test is a standardized test. Okay, so in the coming units or in the coming classes, we will be talking about what they mean by standardization. Okay, process of standardization. Okay, so this standardization process is a standardization or where you're trying to make the test more and more objective, and when they are administered by people, okay, so they are giving you the most genuine appropriate results. Okay, there is a process we will discuss in the coming classes. Okay, then it should have reliability. Okay, reliability talks about the repeatedness of the results. Okay, when the test is administered okay on the same person okay over a period of time, or when it is administered by different people or different persons. So it should guarantee the same results. So repetition of results is called as reliability. If, for example, if I am conducting a test, if my subject is getting okay, one level of marks, and if another one, if a person has been changed, so if the person is getting some other results, so that is not reliable. Okay, so it should be giving the same grades or same level of marks. For example, if you're talking about a average intelligence, that should give average intelligence measures only within that particular okay level of average. Maybe scores in terms of digits can be different, but the same level should be there. If it is giving one time average and if another time above average or below average, so that is not reliable. In simple terms, repetition or consistent of results. If conducted n number of times by n number of people or different people, if the same results are consistent or if it is giving same results repeatedly, so that is called as reliability. Okay, then it should have validity. So validity in simple terms is the purpose. What is the purpose the psychological test is designed, and if it is gathering or if it is measuring that particular selected psychological construct, then it is having validity. For example, if we have a English test, if a person or if a student is taking the English test, if it is testing other than English knowledge, then it is not a valid test. If it is a science paper, biological science, it should be testing the biological knowledge. So in the same way, when you're talking about psychological constructs, if it is measuring what it is intended for. For example, if an intelligence test is testing only intelligence, the purpose for it is designed is called as having validity. If it is testing other than intelligence, then it is not a valid test. Because we are talking about intellectual capabilities or abilities, and if it is testing other than that, so that is not a valid test. So it should have validity. Then we have norms. So based on the performance of the representative sample. So when you have a sample of behavior from sample of subjects, so based on that, it should have certain norms. For example, what is an average score, what is below average score, and what is above average score. For example, if you're talking about intellectual abilities. So there are certain norms, there are certain rules, certain established conditions where you can say or where you can give the interpretation. Based on that particular sample of behavior for sample of subjects is called as norms. So establishing or giving the average levels, or average performance, which can differentiate above and below. So that is called as norms. So norms are the average performance or average performance of repetition or the representative sample. As I said, average is 50%. Based on that, I can say the person is below or above. So that particular norms or conditions are pre-established, and this particular psychological test have certain norms. So based on certain norms, I can interpret the scores and I can give a meaningful interpretation. And also 6, practicality. Practicability. When you're talking about practicability, so it is talking about the practical or the difficulties while you face or while you are administering a psychological test. So how good a psychological test is in terms of, for example, time. For example, if a test is for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, like that. Now you can know that maximum we give a academic test for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. After that, it is not possible. So in terms of too lengthy, having more questions also, for example, 500 questions if you have to answer, maybe not possible. And also because of physical fatigue, the person is getting bored as well, and physical fatigue is not able to answer all the questions. So in terms of time, for example, too lengthy time, or for example, too short, just 10 minutes. Or if talking about 3 hours, 4 hours, lengthy time subject has to spend, so not practically or usability. We talk in terms of usability, maybe not usable. So length, number of items also, and also when you're talking about questions, when they're framed in a very technical terms also maybe not possible. So practically it should be based on the level of the test taker. The one who is taking the test should be up to his knowledge so that he can understand and he can answer the questions. And also in types of scoring. So when the psychologist or the researcher, when they're trying to score, the scoring procedure is also not clear, when it's confusing, and also there is no clarity how to score, can also lead to errors or mistakes in interpretation. So practicality in terms of usability, in terms of time, Not too short, not too lengthy time taking. When you're talking about number of items also, not few questions, also very lengthy, like 500, 600 questions, which can give to errors. We talked about errors also, so fatigue and all that. Okay, and also in terms of scoring questionnaires, okay, the framing of questions also should be based on the test taker, not according to the psychologist. So psychologist knows everything, but when you talk about the test taker, if he's not able to understand, for example, if you're talking about a fifth grade or a sixth grade student, and if the language is not up to his level, so he may not understand, he may not give the correct responses. So these are the characteristics of our psychological test. Okay, so we will make a quick review of our characteristics. So not every test is a psychological test. If you're talking about psychological test, it should have certain characteristics. The first one, objectivity. Objectivity talks about free from all type of subjective judgments, free from bias, free from favoritism, kind of a thing. Okay, subjective feelings. Okay, if it is free, it is called objective. If not, it is called as subjective. So we are talking about objectivity, free from any kind of judgments, any kind of favorites. Then we're talking about second one, standardization. Okay, the one which is standardized through the procedure. Okay, it's called as standardized. Okay, which have reliability, which can give repeated measures when conducted over a period of time. If a person is taking a test over a period of time, that is after a month or after weeks, days, okay, it should give the same results, and also irrespective of the person who is conducting. If I conduct or if someone is conducting, the result should be same. So that is called reliability. Then it should have validity. Validity is the purpose for which a test is designed. If a test is designed to know the intelligence or intellectual ability, it should be able to measure intelligence only. If it is measuring other than intelligence, it is not having validity. For example, if a thermometer is designed to know the temperature, other than temperature, if it is measuring anything else, it is not a valid tool. So in the same way, our psychological test should also have validity. Then it should have norms, that is, what is the average expected performance based on the representative sample. The average performance of the representative sample is called as norm. So based on the norms, we should be able to interpret the results, and we should be able to place the test taker on the continuum of scores or results, that is whether the person is average, below average, or above average. And also it should have practicality, or we're talking about the general usability. So when you're talking about usability, it should be okay having in terms of time, length, questions, and scoring. So when a psychological test is designed, it should have practicability in terms of okay, length. For example, if the questionnaire is having too many questions, for example, 500, 600 questions. For example, we have certain personality test. Okay, I'm not taking the name because I don't want to frighten you. So there are certain tests which is having a 567 questions. So just think about how much time, how much of physical fatigue the person will be going through to answer these questions. So this is how too many questions should not be there, as well as too less number of questions. When you're talking about intellectual ability, psychological construct, okay, and if you're giving only key questions and trying to measure that, maybe not possible. So based on our practicability or usability, there should be a limited number of questions which a person can administer, as well as when you're talking about time also, it should not be too lengthy. Okay, hours together, if it is taking, the person is not giving his correct responses, as well as when you're talking about too short, for example, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, okay, not appropriate to measure a psychological construct like intelligence, as well as framing of questions should not be too, okay, terminology. For example, psychological terms, if you're using many, it will not practically possible to answer, because if I'm talking about school students, I should answer or make questions or use a vocabulary which is understood by the particular grade of student. Okay, and also when I talked about scoring, so scoring is with the psychologist or the person who is taking the exam. If he is not able to score correctly because of no clarity, and if there is a confusion, how to score can also lead to errors in our, okay, psychological test. So it should have all these questions, okay, which are designed according to the vocabulary of the particular level of students who it is designed for, as well as having a time limit which is appropriate for the person to answer, etc. Okay, so this is how a psychological test is having all these characteristics. If a test is having all these characteristics, then only it is called as a psychological test. Okay, so we will continue in the next class.